All right, welcome all to the Enhancing School Capacity to Address Youth Violence webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about utilizing the Community Asset Mapping Framework as an engagement tool. Welcome again. I am James Stark. I'm a Senior Program Officer of the LISC Safety and Justice team. We have a great group of panelists. They're going to be sharing words of wisdom and helping you all think through this process of engaging community partners. One, as you all are probably aware of, we've had several introduction calls with you all thus far. One of the first things that we have heard is that there are some sites that have engaged with the community and the network of partners for some time. And then there's another group of folks that are new to this process and are working to engage community partners, which is a requirement of this grant program. So a couple of the key requirements of this grant program is that local coordinator. And then that second part is a network of partners, specifically to engage community-based organizations that are experienced in involving or engaging individuals that have been, I guess they would be called intervention youth. So youth that have experienced either disciplinary challenges inside of the schools, or it could be juvenile justice agency because of delinquent behavior outside of the schools. So this grant program is going to, provide kind of the framework and the steps to engage community-based partners. Just as a heads up, let's just before we get to the agenda, I should probably do the disclaimer. So just wanted to, again, this is an OJJDP grant program. So we thank you all for your support of this grant program. So just as a preview of coming attractions, we're going to welcome the panelists. We're going to have a couple of polls prior to the panel presenting. And then we're going to have a moderated discussion followed by some interactive Q&A. And I just learned, I'm still getting used to all this Zoom stuff, that apparently if I have a webinar, I can't create breakout rooms. So we're not going to have breakout rooms. So that just means more time for you all to ask us questions or for us to engage you all in questions. And Jenna and Ricardo, do you see the PowerPoint deck?
Not yet. It stopped screen sharing when
you. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had to take it off so I could hit record.
There you go.
All right. So I already walked you all through the agenda. So just again, the goals of this grant program, first and foremost, we're going to try to reduce the incidence of school violence through improved school safety and climate. That means inside the schools and outside the schools. We're creating a cross-sector partnership. We have leadership from a local coordinator. We're going to be delivering individualized case management and utilized school-wide prevention strategies. So this this webinar is going to be focused on that first bullet and that third bullet, with a little bit of information around how that's the local coordinator, what that role is going to look like. So we'll understand the basic elements of community asset mapping. We're going to be utilizing the community asset mapping framework to expand your network of community partners. And we're going to hear from urban and rural practitioner experiences that went through this process that can kind of help explain lessons learned, highlights, challenges, so that you all aren't necessarily trying to recreate the wheel. So as a reminder, the webinar PowerPoint will be added to your ESC, your Enhancing School Capacity resource page. If you want to use that QR code, feel free to check that out. I think Kanisha is going to be dropping in the link to that as well. So if you want to check that out. We also have another grant program that we're just finishing with another couple of months. She's going to drop a link as well to the other grant program that you all can check out. That is our comprehensive school-based violence and victimization prevention program. There's a number of resource tools, knowledge sharing documents, webinars that you all are obviously should feel free to utilize. So before we kick this off, I want to learn a little bit more about what you all are doing thus far. So we're going to create, we have a couple of polls for you to answer. The first one is to get a sense of how many active partners that you all are engaged with at this point. So I'm going to kick that panel, the poll question off right now and give you, let's say, maybe a minute to answer the questions. So we'll give you all about 30 more seconds. Got half of you that have answered the question. All right, it's sticking on 9. So oh, we got a couple others that just jumped in. So we'll give you 10 more seconds. All right, we have quite a range. Hopefully y'all see the answers. Do you all see the answers of the poll? So we have pretty evenly spread across the board. Organizations that have working on it, and then 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, and we have 3 that have over 10. So that's terrific. We're gonna close that one out. So next question is going to be, as you move forward to this grant program, obviously you're going to have a number of opportunities to add to your partnership. So thinking about it, towards the end of the third year of this grant program, how many would you like to have as part of your partnership team? So again, we'll give you about a minute to answer this question, and then we'll check out those results. All right, we got 13 that answered, 14 already. So I think we can end this one fairly quickly. All right, I am going to end that poll and share the results. And it looks like, again, we're thinking, for some organizations, 3 to 5, for a couple others, 6 to 9. And for others, we're hoping to get over 10. So that is helpful to know that we are definitely going to be working to help you get to those numbers. And then we have one final poll question. This is going to help us understand, who in your partnership is going to be leading this work. So we're gonna ask the question, who leads this work? Did that one pop up on your screen? No,
Not yet.
What? Huh. All right. Well, I cannot figure out how to launch that one. Well, I don't understand why. So the question, you can just put it in your chat box. Who do you want from your partnership team, or who do you expect from your partnership to lead the engagement of this work? Is it schools, community-based organizations, or somebody else? And just feel free, if it's a school, if you have a specific title for that individual, feel free to stick that in. Same thing with community-based partner. The more specific, the better. But basically, we want to know if it's going to be a school, community-based organization, or someone else that's going to be leading those efforts. We got a couple of folks that said school. schools. Great. And for those that are answering the schools, is it a family engagement director? Is it somebody from an individual school, or is it from the district school? And if somebody wants to talk too, what we can do real quick, I'm gonna stop sharing. If anybody wants to raise their hand or wants to jump in, want to share a little bit about who that person is and, kind of how they expect to do it, feel free to jump in. Anybody want to jump in? All right, we'll go back to the screen. One quick second before we go to the screen. Later on during the webinar, we're gonna ask some questions based upon kind of your geography. So if you would, next to your name, when you see your name on the Zoom screen, if you right click on it, there's an opportunity to rename. So just add after your name if you are from an urban area, a suburban area, or a rural area. That way we can help understand the audience as well. All right. I'm going to go back to sharing. So with this, I'm going to start introducing our panel. First, we have Jenna Meglin. She's the Director of Policy and Planning at Partners for Rural Impact. Partners for Rural Impact is a national nonprofit committed to rural student success. In her role, she works on both Kentucky state policy and federal state policy, ensuring rural is not left out of critical public policy conversations. In her previous role, she supported rural communities in Eastern Illinois to decrease youth violence by engaging the whole community. She's based in Berea, Kentucky. We also have Karim Morales. She's a program officer supporting LISC Economic Development Program. In her role, she supports local offices advancing creative placemaking in the field through their community-centered economic inclusion work. Before joining the National Economic Development Team, she worked in the Indianapolis office for 4 years, supporting all the arts and culture. She's based out of Indy. And then a little bit later on down the road, to give us some practical experiences in how this is carried out, we're going to be talking to Brandon Taylor. He's a senior program officer with LISC Indy office. So Indy is very well represented today. He provides system change advocacy, fund and strategy development, and implementation leadership for the family and wealth building portfolio and team. Before coming to the Indy office, he worked in the LISC Philly team, where he worked on the Equitable Neighborhoods program, including place-based initiatives, capacity building, community engagement, and safety work. So while these folks are not necessarily safety and justice, quote unquote folks, they are very experienced in this engagement of community-based organizations. So looking forward to hearing from them. And first, we're gonna start with Jenna. Jenna's going to be highlighting kind of the why and how your cohort should be utilizing what she references as a theory of aligned contributions. This focuses on the tailoring the needs of the youth population to work and align with organizations, people, and strategies that can provide those critical supports that students need. This will be critical, ensuring your site's local coordinator has a menu of options available and can lean upon throughout the project period. So Jenna, take this away.
Thank you, James, so much for the introduction and really framing this conversation. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm assuming most folks can consider 11 o'clock afternoon. We do here in the South. So I am located in Berea, Kentucky, which is our headquarters for Partners for Rural Impact. I'm right on the foothills of Appalachian, I'm about, let's say 35 minutes south of Lexington, Kentucky, if you guys are familiar with that. So as James was saying, I am the Director of Policy and Planning, but do have background. My education, my undergrad and grad is actually in criminal justice, focusing on juvenile. So I do have experience, educational and that to bring to the table. But today I'm here to really share with you guys how we kind of operate at Partners for Rural Impact with engaging communities as a whole. So really going to go over collective action and the theory of aligned contributions. So if any of y'all are not yet back. So I just want to note that we look like we have in the house some urban, rural, and suburban. So I always like to think that we have a spectrum of people in the room of their place. So I want to point that out and say that what I'm getting ready to talk about has been successful in all rural, suburban, rural, and everything in between. So next slide, please. So really the umbrella of the way we work is called collective impact. So I know this definition is long. I know that it's probably very technical, but we're going to work our way through this so you guys can kind of understand how it works. So collective impact is, according to this more technical information definition, is a framework to tackle complex social problems in which leaders commit to taking aligned actions around a shared vision and engage at the same time for a long enough time to make a measurable improvement in a common result. I agree. I'm sure all of your eyes are glazing over on that too. So I'm going to give you kind of break down that into another definition that might explain a little bit more about how this is important for your all's grant. So collective impact is a network of community members, organizations, institutions that are committed to advance a result by learning, aligning, and integrating their action to achieve a population or systems level change. So I'm hoping that might be a little bit easier to understand. And then finally, I'll share you the definition of collective impact that I would tell people on the street while I'm working with folks in the community out in Eastern Kentucky or in rural New Hampshire. So that would be essentially collective impact is a group of great folks and leaders in a community or who serve the community who are committed to aligning their contributions and actions to see change in their community around a shared result. So the thing with collective impact is you bring the community together around a shared result, a shared population level result. So an example of that would be all children are safe in and out of school. It doesn't talk about just one individual high school in your community. It doesn't talk about one daycare. It's talking about all children in your community. So that's what everyone wants to work towards. And that's where strategies and action and activities can start working out of that. Next slide. So part of collective impact is the theory of aligned contributions. So simply put, the theory of aligned contributions states that if leaders place the result at the center of their work and create a powerful container to hold the work and provide the skill sets needed and the capacity for folks to engage, collaborate, and align action, that you'll have success moving your result in a positive way. So you can break those down into three different buckets. So the first one is call to action. The second one is the container. And the third one is the capacity to collaborate. So call to action is everyone's has decided what they want to work towards. They want to work to ensure all children are safe in and out of school. So they put that at the center of the work. And they also have a sense of urgency. So it's not, oh, we're going to talk about this, put it on the back burner, and then maybe 3 years from now, a group of folks will come and say, let's do this. No, it's really coming together and being engaged and actively moving results. The container can be the place, the time, and the tools folks need to accelerate results. And space could be a virtual space as we are here today, or it could be actually an in-person space. Time, of course, is the time it takes for folks to meet, and then the tools. And then finally, capacity to collaborate is, again, just building that trust, identifying contributions, and really holding ourselves, individuals of the collaborative and the collective, accountable to ensuring we're taking actionable steps towards that result. Next slide. Click it again, sorry. Okay, so another way for more visual learners, I just wanted to throw a couple more visual slides that might help. So with theory of aligned contributions, we always have our result in the center. So the middle of that star is where you'd put your result that you're focusing as a collaborative. So that would be all children are safe in and out of school. And that is a shared result. And with a shared result, you have a shared agenda. Now outside where you see all the people, I was expecting to be able to use my cursor. All the people around are all the different sectors, partners, stakeholders, community members that have the ability to contribute something to the result, and then also to work together to align those contributions and actions to actually make movement at the population level to ensure all children are safe in and out of school. Next slide. So this one is the best illustration of theory of aligned contributions. So in the center, again, we have all children are safe in and out of school. And we know to be successful in moving this, we need multiple sectors, multiple contributions to this result. So on the outside, you will see the main sectors of communities. You have public education, health services, nonprofit, faith, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the main ones you see in a community, but you can also add other sectors. And so it's important to understand and really help leaders understand that they do have a contribution to play. So for example, if we're in a group and we're looking at the result, all children are safe in school and out of school. One of the first sectors most people think of is public education. They think, oh, that's the school's responsibility of stuff that happens in the school. I'm outside the school. I do not have any contribution to play. But the reality is public education does play one, but other sectors also have contributions to play. So for example, public health. So in the public health sector, we know so many kids, especially since COVID, have been dealing with behavioral and emotional stress. So we've seen the need for more mental health programs, counseling, and support for those kids. So if you look in the private sector, the public sector, the closest to the children, the center, are those frontline workers. So what kind of contribution can, say, a mental health counselor provide to the student? So maybe it's giving them a stuffed animal when they come into the center. Maybe it's just having an additional conversation with them of just asking them how they are. So that's one way, front lines in the public health sector. But if you move back, program leaders. So what type of programs are happening in the public health sector that have a contribution for all children are safe in and out of school? So again, that could be a mental health care provider. What can they contribute to children's health, safety in and out of school? So it might be providing flyers and information at their center that's about what things kids could do to ease their anxiety, or things youth and families can do together to really address the unsafety. So it might be something informational that they can put on the counter at their organization. Systems level, what does the public health sector as a system provide to the community, and what contributions can they play that really help reach all children are safe in and out of school? So in Kentucky, we have, each county has a public health, Department of Health. I don't know if that's like in every state, but ours is county-wise. And so what systems change can they do at that department level? What contribution through that can they make to really move the dial and all children are safe in and out of school? And then finally, at the policy leaders, what is there that contribution can they be there? A lot of times folks kind of leave the policy aspect out because it's very touchy and just very hard to grasp. It's in my title and I still have days of thinking, what am I doing in my policy work? But it's very important because, as we all realize, unfortunately, a lot of our systems and our policies are written to work exactly the way they are working, which is not the way we want them to be working in our communities. So there has to be policy changes sometimes to remove those barriers, and those policy leaders could advocate for the collective and the youth of the community that this policy change needs to happen. So as you can see, each sector, and within the sector, there are different levels and levels of contributions that individuals can bring to really meet the result that all children are safe in and out of school. Next slide. So I know this is a lot of information, but I'll also drop in some links or give them to James to help give a little more information about all the stuff that I'm talking about. So the 5 conditions really to be successful with a theory of aligned contributions and collective impact is you have to come in with a common agenda, which it sounds like with your all's grants you guys have, it's school safety. So you need to have everyone needs to have a shared understanding of the problem, align on the approaches or strategies, and then really align the actions. Another big thing, there needs to be measurement, shared measurement. There's no way to tell if a community has improved unless you have a data point or data points to measure. So for example, if you're looking at all children are safe in and out of school, a data point you might measure would be the number of students that are suspended at school. And so say if in 2022, the number was 300 students were expelled from school. What we do with the shared measurement is track that year to year with hoping that all the aligned contributions, the actions and the activities will lower that number. So in 5 years, we only have maybe 50 kids suspended, which that contributes to all children are safe in and out of school. So there's next one is mutually reinforcing activities. There's always stuff happening that you need to happen before you start to move forward on something. So role clarity. What is your role within the collaborative, but also what hats are you bringing from your organization to the group? Because we all know that we wear 1,000 different hats during the day at our job. So we have to make it clear of what role we're bringing to the collaborative. And then of course, making sure everyone sees that we do have, each of one of us has a unique contribution that we can bring something to the table. Continuous communication, I think, is just a given, but the big thing there is for any of this to happen, there has to be trust. You have to build the trust. So with all participating organizations within the collaborative and also within the whole community, because if there's not buy-in and trust, there will be no action moving forward. And then finally, what helps this work move forward is if there's backbone support. So Partners for Real Impact is a backbone support organization for numerous collective impact communities and partnerships. So that's essentially an organization or group of organizations that are a step or two away from the work that's happening at the collaborative, but they can support facilitation of the work, data collection analysis, also logistics scheduling, tech issues. So that really helps a collaborative and collective impact because they're not spending all their time on these types of things. They're focusing on the work at hand, which they put at the center of the work. Next slide. So I know that's a lot of work and a lot of words and a lot of slides, but I want to just leave you with what I think is simply what you guys can do. And the truth is we attain more and have greater impact when we work collectively on an issue. So I think this just sums up both collective impact and the theory of aligned contributions. So I'll hand it back over to you, James.
Thank you so much, Jenna. That was terrific. You know, I was very intentional about starting with the how or the why first. You know, one of our local sites in, we have a local site in Chicago, LISC Chicago, and they work with a predominant violence intervention organization. And the leader of that organization said, you know, going through this asset mapping process was critical to his becoming a leader in this field, because he was able to understand who the organizations are that support young people in and around the neighborhood where he worked, how they supported the young people. And, you know, as Jenna was saying, that these relationships and data, all of this matters to the central goals of the project and the program and the strategy that he was trying to implement, which was keeping young people safe and out of the way of gun violence and community violence. So we're now going to turn it over to Kari. And she's going to talk about the community asset mapping model that her team has created. And she'll walk you through how to go about using that. Kari?
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Karim Morales here. I'm a program officer on the economic development team. So happy to be here. And would love some interaction in the chat, some reactions, just so I have a sense of who's in the room. Before I even start, like, who has heard of asset mapping and who's done it? Anything that you can drop in the chat, give me a reaction. We did not create asset mapping. This is a practice that has been done for years. And it may look different in your community, right? But I think the framework is pretty similar. First time hearing about it. Okay, so we have a mix. We have a mix of folks who've heard of it and first time. So I'm excited to just jump into a few slides that we have here. And as I was preparing for the presentation, I was thinking about also my background and like the story that I bring to the table. And I grew up in the Midwest, urban cities, grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as well as Indianapolis, Indiana. So this is home for me. And I really love thinking about all the things that I would consider assets, thinking back as a kid, as a teenager, and now as an adult, right? So what is asset mapping? And it's basically putting all the assets that you can think of in your community on a map. But more technically, it's a capacity-focused tool of reimagining the placemaking practice around the strengths and gifts that your community has to offer, right? That they're already there. So sometimes we tend to fixate, based on our work, we fixate on the problems that we have, right? Is it the crime that we see at the corner's gas station? Is it the potholes that we have to drive through every day to work? Lack of lighting, right? So I think it's easy to get caught in the things that we don't have, instead of really thinking of an asset-based approach of all the beautiful things that really bring us together and all the things that we celebrate in our neighborhood and in our communities. So although an asset-based approach may not fully remove the need for outside resources, it certainly makes their use more effective. So I like to think of asset mapping as a tool that allows us to collaborate with one another, to discuss what skills we bring, what resources we have in our community, and really promote and advocate for the things that we love in our communities. Next slide, please. So this is an example. I just took a screenshot of a map that we have in one of the neighborhoods here on the east side of Indianapolis. But it's really important to start a community dialogue by first identifying strengths and assets. So really looking at, without overthinking, it could be as simple as just creating a list of all the things that you see in your community: tangible assets, people, recurrent events, history and traditions, and public services. We did just to give you an example here in Indianapolis, during we had a quality of life planning event in one of our neighborhoods in Indianapolis. And we invited, over 100 community members to look at really big, we had maps printed out, and we had stickers like green, red, and yellow. And green was, those favorite restaurants, those cultural centers, is there our congregation or faith-based center? And the red are kind of like, what are those intersections that you feel unsafe, the infrastructures and, where you want it to be. So it was really cool, like doing the activity with other community members, because things that I saw through my lens were completely different than another person. So it was a neat opportunity to come together and kind of discuss these points. And then I'll go a little bit more into detail of what these bullet points even are. So next slide, please, James. All right. So what are some examples of tangible assets? Is this public spaces that you can think of in your neighborhood, in your community? Is it, what's located near your schools? Is it a local business that your students like to go to, cultural organizations, faith-based institutions, right? What kind of housing do you have around? people could also be an asset, right? Your local heroes. Who are your doers? Who are your creative workers? People who bring arts and culture to your neighborhood, to your community. Resident demographics. Do you have an immigrant population? Do you have BIPOC communities? You know, what are those demographics that make your community unique to your area? Next slide. Recurrent events, right? So like fairs and festivals here in downtown Indianapolis, we have a local church that does an annual strawberry festival, and it's their biggest fundraiser. They do it every summer. Parades. We also host the Indy 500. So, you know, those are the things that really get people excited, things that, you know, it totally transforms the city during that time. What are assets under history and traditions? You know, what memorable events has occurred in your community, cultural events? Are there any historic building sites? And then where do people in your community go for health services, and where do your students go for recreation, and for public safety? Next slide, please. So I wanted to take I don't know if I have a capability of sharing my screen, but I wanted to show you a map that's interactive that we have in Indianapolis. James, can I share my screen? Let me see. Cool.
Yeah, I'll take mine off
All right.
and give it to you. You should be able to share screen.
You have to.
Hmm? Didn't work?
Provide permission.
What? Make.
So I'll talk through it, and if we can figure it out, great. If not, I'll drop the link.
Should work
But
now.
all right.
There we go.
Okay, cool. So Indianapolis, we've done this activity several times. This is a great example that I like to go to on the east side of Indianapolis after community engagement meetings, after surveys. You know, community engagement takes time. It's not a what is it? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And to Jenna's point of building trust, that takes time and you can't rush it, right? So, you know, the East Side did a lot of work doing that trust building, the relationship building. They created this beautiful interactive map. They've listed organizations and agencies, houses of faith, schools, restaurants, grocery stores, venues and entertainment. And you can literally go into this here. I'm actually going to copy this link so I can drop it here in the chat. But you can scroll through this map and click on all the things you would like to see. And it, you know, Gordon's ice cream. You have your churches and your congregations that are in the area. Yeah, Wheeler Mission Ministries is for the homeless and other services, right? So I just wanted to give an example of something. I feel like theory is one thing, but putting it into practice is another. So this is an example of, you know, how do you provide a resource for your community members to tap into? And, you know, if you're sharing your story with another organization, you have a visual to share and like, look, these are all the great things that our community has. And now that I'm sharing my screen, I'm also going to share the asset mapping digital toolkit that we have online. If you just Google LISC Creative Placemaking Digital Toolkit, you can pull this up. We have a variety of resources as well, but this also just walks you through exactly what the presentation that we went through just now. It also gives you an opportunity to download a worksheet, and you can actually do this as an activity with your team. And you know what I find very interesting too, like what you ask, filling it out by yourself, and then coming with your colleagues and like having an activity for your staff meeting or, you know, whatever you may have in your current role, and like what you all come together, and then asking youth, right? Like, I wonder what they would put as assets, and then extending that invitation to families. I just find it very interesting. But again, it allows you an opportunity to really collaborate. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you, James. And you can pull up the PowerPoint here. And I think I have one more slide and then pass it back to James.
All right, we should be back on.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, next slide.
Yep.
That's it. You know, for summary, it allows you to really take a community project from a strength-based lens rather than a deficit one, right? So it's a tool that allows for community engagement, and it also allows you a way to really do that storytelling and create your own narrative, right? So with that, I'll close out and give it back to James. Thanks.
Thank you, Kari, and that's terrific. And I think, a couple of key points I just want to highlight is that this grant program allows us this 3 years to build those relationships and build trust with organizations, with young people, with students, with principals, guidance counselors, the gambit. And, as both Jenna and Kari illustrated, it's going to take all of those folks working together to support you all, to support each other, and most importantly, to support students. As I've had a couple of conversations with y'all, I give the example of, if you're a mental health organization, and you're working with students who are very interested in music or arts, you can address some of their mental health capacity needs, but if you want to also connect them to other community-based partners, and hopefully also connect them to one caring adult, which is one of the greatest protective factors for young people, being able to connect them and knowing who in the community provides arts or music classes or support. As Kari was saying too, there's the housing issues. Understanding who provides help when students and their families are transitioning in housing. That's really going to make an impact both on the student and the family, and hopefully bring them closer to be connected with your schools. So thank you, Kari, for showing us how to kind of walk through that community asset mapping framework. We will share that link with you all, probably both in this webinar, but also afterwards as well. So feel free to use that. And if you have questions about how to use that, don't hesitate to reach out to your TTA lead or reach out to me, and we'll make sure we connect you. So we've provided a bit kind of the theory behind this and a little bit of the practical component of this. But I want to bring in Brandon to talk a little bit about the work that he did in Philadelphia, kind of going through this process, and especially around engaging community violence intervention organizations, and to help kind of walk through some of the lessons that you learned throughout this process, because this is tough, this is challenging. There are some organizations that are not willing to serve young people who have been engaged in violence. So understanding, how do I, engage these organizations, and how do I know that they're going to be able to serve the young people that we might be referring them to? So Brandon, thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing your piece of it. I'm going to stop sharing while you're talking.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, James, also for the invitation, and really glad to be able to join the conversation this afternoon. So yeah, for us, as I was thinking about my work in Philadelphia, I spent, several years there in Philly, supporting our equitable neighborhoods portfolio of work. And as James mentioned earlier, that entailed, our capacity building support to local CDCs, our community engagement efforts through our resident leadership development program entitled Community Connectors there in Philly, and then also through our safety work. So one of the engagements I think I wanted to talk about today was, our engagement that was focused on Southwest Philadelphia. And this was a newer community for our team at LISC Philly to be engaging. We lacked an extensive, history with many of the groups that were operating in this area. So we were essentially starting from scratch. The scope of work for our engagement in that community was really to create a plan for Southwest Philly that addressed several of the shared challenges that were emerging in that community, the priorities, defining, the approach for how this community would actually begin to welcome, new investment and development in that particular area of Philadelphia. So there were a lot of things happening in that community that were, I guess happening without the input of others. And there was a lot of priorities that the community members just really felt like weren't being pushed to the forefront of the investment that was happening in their neighborhood. So essentially, we were tasked with uniting a group of individuals who live in and who work in and love this neighborhood of Southwest Philadelphia to create a plan for how they would advocate for their neighborhood. And thankfully, we were able, even though we did not have any existing kind of long-term relationships in that community, we were able to leverage the connectivity of an existing group that was in that area, which was known as the Southwest Community Leadership Circle. And that group was a phenomenal group to start off with engaging. So they were made up with, child care center operators and Black captains and local business owners and city community, outreach coordinators, of course, directors of other local nonprofit groups, but most of which were residents in the community. And so our goal was to start with this group and to ask the question of, who is really missing from these conversations that needs to be here and engage with these efforts. And so those initial members of the Southwest Community Leadership Circle became ambassadors for this enhanced engagement effort that we were leading. And they really helped us expand our group to include directors of cultural associations, library community engagement directors, pastors from local houses of worship. The offices of state representatives were also part of that. We had directors from local reentry programming and also resident councils from housing communities that were all participating in this effort. And so once we had that group together, our 4 goals, I guess you could say, from engaging with this group were to define our priorities, kind of why are we here? Why are we, looking to come together and unite at this time? We wanted to understand the state of the community network. So where are things actually at in the community? What are the relationships like? What are the, relationships that need to be built, need to be established? We want to focus on building collective knowledge and power among that resident group. So, for so long, residents had gone without being engaged in a lot of work that was happening in their communities. And so one of our focuses was to really empower residents to take back the table of being able to have a say in the direction of their communities that they were living in. And then lastly, we wanted to get into co-designing community-led action projects in Southwest Philadelphia. And I know Jenna and Kadi talked about some fantastic frameworks for us to think about community engagement and asset mapping. One of the frameworks that we also leaned on heavily in our work was called the I, We, It framework. I'm not sure if folks have ever heard of that, but the I, We, It framework, and it consisted of the I, in that scenario, consisted of engaging the individual leaders and their values and their roles and their expertise, and ultimately the skills that they would bring to this larger group, right? So moving from the I then to the we. The we focused on really the entire group or the network. So asking the question of, what relationships, what organizations, what networks are these leaders bringing to the table? And then that moves us into the it, which was the systems level change that all of these groups, that this group of people was really focused on addressing or seeking to address together. So what are they really passionate about changing in their community? So the I, We, It framework was how we really designed our entire engagement with that, Southwest Philadelphia group that we were working with. So underneath the I, I'm not sure if I have a couple minutes to talk about it, but underneath the I, we, defined kind of our community agreement. So we talked about, how are we going to work together? What helps you be most productive in these spaces? What environments, is helpful for you to really bring your best to this effort? We also talked about a really neat activity called the Create Your Superhero Baseball Card exercise, which is where we had each person that was participating in that group identify their superpower. So whether that was connecting and collaborating with others, or navigating complicated transactions, or advocating for children and families, whatever the superpower was. And then we also have them identify the groups that they're connected to. So is it community agencies? Is it resident-led volunteer efforts? Is it advisory boards? Is it libraries? Is it schools? How are these? And then we presented those to the group so that the group would be able to understand kind of all of the players that were at the table and all the expertise and all the skills and just all the superpowers that they could really draw on to actually move their work forward. Once we moved into the we phase, so moving from the I phase into the we phase, we focused on strategies that were uniting the group around a common vision for their future community. So we called it a line of sight. So what is that unexpected, just like clear view of the future for your community, for your neighborhood? We leveraged the group's insights around the community priorities, and we looked to identify those across 4 kind of high-level groups, and they were health and wellness, housing and community ownership, resident engagement and leadership, legal assistance, and also youth recreation and employment. And so inside of each of those categories, we had different sub-priorities consisting of environmental concerns, crime reduction, creating safe places for kids to play, increasing wealth building, a whole bunch of different sub-priorities that allowed this group to begin to see that each of them may have common things and in line with the other, that they could then work together on advancing in their local community, and that would create alignment, that would create them to be able to really work together as a team, moving this work forward in their local community. I want to talk about the it phase, which is kind of the ultimate where we were leading to, was from the I to the we to the it, and that is really focused on the systemic change that we were looking to address inside of Southwest Philadelphia. And the way that we approached focusing on the systemic change was using a technique called relationship mapping. So not necessarily asset mapping, but really looking at the priorities that the group was most interested in working on and documenting all of the people, the organizations, the actors, the stakeholders that were involved in that system. And so, for example, one of the issues that we looked at was an environmental justice issue around illegal dumping that was happening in certain streets of that community. And so our group mapped out kind of all the actors and all the stakeholders in that. So from elected officials, parks and recreation staff, the streets department, licenses and inspections, the police officers that were assigned to that district. We had block captains in Philadelphia that were also part of those discussions. The principals and also the directors from the local schools that were proximate to where these incidents were happening. And then we analyzed the health of those different relationships. So we looked at kind of, do you have a relationship with this entity, or do you need to build a relationship with this entity? Is there an emerging opportunity with this specific partner that the group could benefit from in kind of advancing this efforts forward? And from there, the group really utilized the results of that relationship mapping to outline a collaboration structure for how they could actually tackle that priority. So who was going to lead and coordinate the direction of the work, right? What relationships need to be established with which actors, and who could actually lead in making those connections? Who preferred to be engaged as a decision maker on next steps versus just being somebody who was going to be leading the efforts forward? Who wanted to just be involved on project specific instances where maybe they weren't included in everything, but they were definitely included in certain things that touched on their areas of expertise. And I'll just say in summary that some of the lessons that we learned from this engagement were, that the higher the level of our transparency and also the clarity around each person's roles, the greater amount of community ownership of that project and of that effort that was moving forward. We also learned that people are getting together at some point to talk about the issues in their community, whether that's happening at libraries, recreation centers, places of worship, what have you. The goal is to find out where those places are happening, where those conversations are happening, because those are the optimal spaces to connect with those potential partners and to really understand more about the resident perspectives on these community priorities and what's happening in their community and how they desire to see change happen in their neighborhood. And then lastly, I would say is just the embracing of a grassroots to the treetops mentality. So focusing on empowering residents to really inform and to guide these conversations around the changes that are happening in their community. For us, we operated with a understanding that change should create pathways for local residents to access these regional resources and to ultimately, these policy influencers where we can really address the underlying patterns of systems and models that are happening that are resulting in inequities in our community. So James, I hope that was helpful for the goals of the conversation, but thank you again. Happy to take any questions as well.
This is a really great, rich conversation. Thanks a lot, Brendan, for your experiences in Philly. Jenna, I know this might look a little bit different in rural communities where, instead of, walking down the block or having block captains, now we're talking about, engaging partners that might be hours away. Now I have a slide. Do you want me to put that slide
No,
up?
I don't need the slide.
All right, great. So maybe talk about like, what does this look like for rural communities?
Yeah, sure. So actually we were lucky, I guess. Well, it didn't work out super great. But we at PRI received a justice grant that really looked at youth violence, and they used a more urban model, which is hotspots. So we realized that the urban model for hotspots of where crime happens doesn't really work in rural communities. So part of the process we took as we started building relationships is also figuring out what is happening in communities, in rural communities, in theirs, and where it's really happening. So we really, part of the grant and just the way we operate is we really wanted the community to be at the center of what's happening. So we had individual meetings with folks. We had community members reaching out. It was really community led. So we had realized we needed partnerships with law enforcement, churches, mental health providers, schools, nonprofits, colleges, residents. We even had a radio station that would broadcast things for youth and about what's going on. So that we really realized that it would take a whole community to really move the dial on all youth are safe and supported in and out of school. So what we also realize is the way we work is what I talked about earlier is the importance of data. So we really did both qualitative and quantitative data collection to really see what is happening in the county, in the rural counties. So of course, police data is police data. It's the best available data. You use it as you can, but take it as a grain of salt. So we saw that a lot of things were happening in different areas within our in the county, according to the police data, but we also had numerous community town halls where we would ask them 2 questions. On this map of your county with red dots, put where you know kids are being engaged in risky behavior. And then on this map over here with green dots, mark all the assets that you have in your community. So what are those places that are positive for youth to go to, partners, and then also we had open space for people to add notes. For example, there's a grandma in the community that lets works with youth, she mentors, but there's no way to put that on a map. So we made sure we had room for the folks to also list that. So what we really realized is what the community and the residents identified as places, quote unquote, hotspots of youth in their county were happening in abandoned strip mines. They were happening in areas where you really can't bring people together or an intervention. So we realized the need to really look at hotspots. So how do we drive youth away from those abandoned strip mines, and how do we encourage them to come to bright spots that have been assets in the community that will hopefully decrease their risky behavior and violence. So through that asset mapping, we really realized that the school in rural communities, of course, is one of the biggest partners in place for kids. So we definitely realized the need to partner more with schools at different levels. We also realized the need to work with faith-based organizations to provide activities and mentoring for youth. And another example is one county, surprisingly, had a Boys and Girls Club. And so we knew that was an asset from the community, an asset for younger youth, but it wasn't so much an asset for teenagers. So through that data process and decision-making and folks aligning their contributions and actions, we realized that there needs to be something implemented at the Boys and Girls Club for teenagers. So what was implemented was what was called SWAT, which is Shape Up with the Teen. So the local law enforcement officers would actually come to the Boys and Girls Club and physically work out, lifting weights, cardio, with the teenagers, and during those workouts, they actually were mentoring the youth as well. So that was one way how we really use this process in different ways we've been talking about today of how we really looked at that and brought it down to an activity level that had an impact, that impact over time will have a measurable impact on all youth are safe and supported in and out of school. So I'll hand it back to you, James.
Sounds good. Thank you. No, this was really terrific. And I think this speaks to the task at hand for our the sites. To be able to lead, coordinate, this delivery of what OJJDP has referenced, kind of backpacks for students, or, kind of case management. And I think the folks here are highlighting the importance of not only doing the asset mapping, that's not enough. It's also, you also have to do the next steps, which are, how do we collaborate? What does that look like? How do we hold each other accountable? And it's across all levels, policy levels, the strategy levels, the funding levels. And, I think one of the things that is in here that we probably don't necessarily think about is sustainability. A lot of this work doesn't necessarily require funding, yet it can bring you lots of it. A lot of organizations, funders, federal agencies, they're interested in not just what you are doing, but what your, what is the specific challenge that you're trying to address, and how are you working across organizations and partners to address that challenge, and does those strategies align with the challenge that you define? So, having this group of folks all together, is critical to, building your opportunities to engage young people, keep them safe in schools and in the community, but also bring additional resources to your organizations. So we're gonna kind of pause our part now and kick it over to you all. And we want to bring you into the conversation. You can either ask questions in the Q&A, you can put the questions in the webinar, and we also have a couple of questions teed up that we can utilize too, if that works as well. So Becky had asked a question, and I'm going to tee this up for the group, and you all can figure out who you want to answer. But have you encountered pushback or resistance, I'm assuming, to engage this process due to a lack of capacity, especially working with education partners? And I think this is around, Becky, if you want to jump in and add to it, I think I can unmute you. But I think what we've heard oftentimes is that, schools are in the midst of doing 103 different things, and trying to figure out, like, how do I just get used to this new normal, and then to think about going into the community and doing this asset mapping is kind of outside their typical duty. So the capacity to be able to do this is probably a challenge. So I'm going to tee it up to you all. How do you address that capacity gap?
So I think I'll just start. So with our organization, actually, our main partners are our schools. So they are our number one partner. One thing is we spend a lot of time building that trust with those school districts. So we have partnerships and relationships from teachers all the way up to usually the superintendent, and depending on who that person is, depending on who at my organization works with them. But we get it a lot of times, and we walk in with the room telling the schools that we know that you are limited on capacity, that you're wearing 1,000 different hats, being pulled every which way, and doing a lot of jobs that really are outside a teacher's or a superintendent's job, especially in a rural community. So what we really do is really to build that up, but also that's the importance of identifying the role clarity and what you're wanting them to really have. And Brandon did a great job kind of talking about that role clarity. So it kind of depends on what you're wanting that person or school partner to kind of what their contribution, if they can understand what they can contribute, that increases their knowledge of who maybe within the school district has the capacity or has the knowledge to be there. So I think a lot of times it comes down to building trust, role clarity, and really contribution that's helping them understand what contribution they can play. But it's we've had school districts before that just say, we can't do this. We just don't have the capacity. Like I said, we are a backbone organization. So a lot of times we're able to facilitate that through with the organizations or the school districts. So that's one thing that, like, is a heart of our organization, is helping build the capacity of organizations so they can partake in community problem solving.
I'm not sure if this would be something that could be duplicated in other communities or other areas. But I know for our work in Southwest Philadelphia, we were able to, engage individuals around having a stipend for their participation in our engagement session. So I don't know, if that's available in other places, but I know for us that was it made a big difference in the amount of engagement and the participation that we had, and lessened. We still had pushback, but it lessened the pushback because folks were being compensated for their expertise that they were bringing to the different meetings and to the different workshops and conversations that we led with the group. So that's another strategy that worked really well for us in Southwest Philly.
Thank you both. I'd love to hear from somebody from the schools. I just put it in the chat, but would there be somebody interested? Just raise your hand. I can unmute you. In jumping in and sharing the roles and responsibilities of school-based youth and family engagement staff. I know some of you have staff like that work in your schools, and I'm really interested. Maybe you can share how others think about what those roles and responsibilities are, and kind of what they do as part of their work. So if anybody wants to raise their hand and share a little bit about that, that'd be terrific. I know some of our schools have those folks. All right, well, we're going to leave that as, oh, there we go. Albert, all right. We will open it up to you. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to kind of share a little bit about the relationship between our CBO and the local school district. What they've done is they welcome our staff to go out there and be a part of the upcoming academic year as an elective course. So that's putting our staff right in direct communication with some of the youth. It's an elective course because we're bringing an evidence-based curriculum. So we're literally going to be there 5 days a week throughout the academic year. We do have a relationship with another school district that's taking a different approach. They're working more from the administrator side, and their district-wide counseling staff are in coordination with our facilitators, and they do case-by-case referrals, and they also do classroom presentations for different school sites that need more of that intervention or evidence-based curriculum services and mentoring. And then the other element is, for this upcoming academic year, for the parent engagement side, community side, we'll be facilitating parent workshops. So the frequency and duration is going to be planned out. Literally today's their first day back from summer break. So they're ready. They're clearing space out the end of, last academic year, and this year they're going to have dedicated space to us. So we have two different types. It's going to be really interesting. Classroom space dedicated for our curriculum services, to be providing that to high school students, and then the parent space for evening, afternoon, or weekend workshops, whichever direction they want to go. So it's going to be an exciting academic year for us, and we're really thrilled about it. So thank you all for sharing your testimonies about what's worked out there. I really got a lot out of the asset mapping piece. So thanks for that, because it really opened my eyes to the other elements of what we could be doing. So far we're doing a lot of listening, right, for the administration side and the school sites, and letting them direct us to the internal hotspots on campuses or schools. But we do want to be mindful of just how significant of a role it could be to get out onto the community. So I think that's something I'd like to take back to our team after this call. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Albert. Kathy, I know you wanted to jump in as well. Can you share where you're from too, Kathy?
Sure. So my name is Kathy Kimani, and I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, and work for St. Paul Public Schools. And I can say that, we have sort of a district office of, it's actually called the Office of Family Engagement and Community Partnerships. And I would say that office does a couple different things. They have several parent advisory councils that are, I'd say, specific, like racially targeted specific groups. So they have like an African-American Parent Advisory Council, Hmong Parent Advisory Council, American Indian Parent Advisory Council. So we have several different groups, and then they all come together a representative or two from each group also come together and form like a all advisory, parent advisory. And then also we have large requests for proposals that have gone out from that office to develop community partnerships with different youth serving organizations in our community. So we sort of have that office, and then at our site based at several of the different schools, some of them have family engagement staff, but I would say a lot of that work of connecting families and students to our community partners is really the school social workers or those contact people in the building that then referrals kind of go through them. They'll contact families and try to match a partner to a family.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Kathy. That reminds me of the story. I did some work, I believe it was in, I think it was in Lowell, Massachusetts. And there was a significant immigrant population there. And I remember one of the stories was that there was a number of young people. There's a parent organization, and the schools became in close touch with that parent organization and want to have them be more active in the schools. And one of the things they found out through this communication and collaboration with the parent organization was that a lot of the students were reporting that when they got Fs on their papers, that meant fine. And so a lot of the parents were like, hey, my kiddos are doing great in school. And because the schools had collaboration with this parent group, they were able to let the parents know that Fs weren't necessarily fine. So needless to say, that relationship was an eye-opener for some of the students that thought they were pulling a fast one over their parents, and really was able to increase collaboration, communication, and trust with parents in that community. So, Kathy, that's a really great example. And, I think, being able to engage the different populations in the community will be important to the work of all the organizations here. Anybody else have questions or comments they want to share? Please feel free to raise your hand. And we'll try to get those. We have another 15 minutes, so we can continue on. If not, we have a couple of questions that we'd love for you to put in the chat. So, kind of thinking around this work when you kind of take it back to your schools, who are some of those people in the community that are connectors and leaders, and just maybe share some of those, and we can, bounce some ideas off and back and forth. So thinking about your community, who are the connectors and who are the leaders that you think would be helpful to engage? Don't all go at the same time. Let's go. All right. Our mayor, the school superintendent. Yep. And are there some folks that might be more frontline based that you can think of? I know, Brandon, you were talking about some of the, is it Brandon or Kari? You were talking about the grandmas in the community. I think Kari, you were talking about the grandmas in the community. The grandmas and the aunties, those are huge connectors. Librarians, coaches, that's good. Coaches, yes.
I thought Jenna mentioned the grandmas, so.
The aunties and the grandmas. Yeah, the teachers, sometimes it's school janitors too. Or bus drivers, oftentimes, that are connectors.
James, can I ask, are other sites familiar with block captains? Or do you all have those in other parts of the? I know in Philadelphia is a big thing for us, that block captains were tremendously engaged with a lot of the things that were happening in the community. So I wonder if that's also something others have seen.
Yeah, explain what a block captain is in Philly.
So volunteers can, basically sign up to become block captains, and really in charge of walking the community, overseeing beautification efforts and support, connecting different groups to other groups in the community that are working, on like projects, and making sure that folks are, enjoying, safe neighborhoods really was one of the goals around block captains. So I'm not sure if
How did the block captains, if at all, how did they connect with schools or with parents?
they'd work directly with, community, engagement, facing people from the schools. Oftentimes you see them a lot of, very active around the, when school season's about to start off again. So they'd be very, frequently seen as familiar faces at orientation meetings and other engagements with parent teacher nights. Those activities where block captains could be familiar with the schools. And so if kids were walking to school, they would know who their block captain is and familiar with who to talk to if they needed support.
In California, we just did a webinar for the other grant program that you all might have joined, some of you might have joined, where they interacted with community health education workers. And those are in California, they were called promotores de salud. And they were credible messengers, kind of as folks in Atlanta were highlighting. They're credible messengers in the community that were connecting with Latino mothers, grandmothers, aunties, and helping to establish relationships and understand what are some of the needs of the young people and the families in those areas. And that's particularly helpful for schools to kind of get a sense of why is Johnny not acting his usual vibrant self today. And they might have a connection to the community health education worker and understand that there was a violent incident at the house, and that we might need to take special care today, and make sure that if he says something or reacts in a way that's not normal, to understand why that's happening. So having these relationships are really important for the schools to understand what's going on in the lives of the students and families that they're engaged with every day. Do you want to talk a little bit more about credible messengers, Chris 180? And you can say no too if you don't want to. That's fine. We'll eventually talk about that. I'm gonna open it up just in case.
Hello.
Hey, boy.
Yes. Hi, this is Kristen Hendricks with Chris 180. Yeah, so I actually just had to Google it because I hear the term all the time, and someone else that's got a similar DOJ grant at the organization I work with said just over the weekend, oh, I'm a credible messenger, and I'd heard that term a lot, but I think it's really meant to be someone who kind of looks like the community, came from the community, similar to maybe I've heard of a violence interrupter. And yeah, I lost the Google answer, but yeah, a youth advocate, someone who can help spread the word about anti-violence initiatives, and credible messengers. There was another term, neighborhood leaders, again, connectors, they have relevant life experiences. So I think that teens can potentially see them as someone who's a little more trustworthy of teens or adults, just somebody who's got more of that lived experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a couple of our subject matter experts that we'll introduce you to a little bit down the road utilizes credible messengers inside the schools. So they have a specific number of students that the assistant principal has engaged this team with and said, here are 30 young people that are if they continue down this behavior, they're highly likely to be suspended or expelled. And so they get connected to this team of credible messengers who engage those 30 individuals on a regular basis inside the schools. And, they're also, communicate that message about who these credible messengers are to the teachers. So, say James is, creating problems inside of a classroom, instead of sending me to, suspending me or sending me to the principal's office or what have you. they'll have me engage with a credible messenger, and the credible messenger will help to create opportunities to kind of get, leveled down a little bit, have a conversation, understand why behind the actions of that young person. So definitely think about, utilizing credible messengers both inside and outside of the schools as well. Let's see. All right. Any other questions or comments? We have some Black captains in Miami. That's great. And some in Chicago, for sure, definitely. All right. Well, with nothing that I'm seeing, I just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Kari. Thank you, Brandon. Like we said earlier in the beginning, we have recorded this webinar. We'll put the slide deck up as well as the community asset mapping framework on the ESC AYV website. And if you have questions, specific comments around, how do we do this or why do we do this? Please don't hesitate to contact your TTA team, either myself, Ricardo, LeVar, Matt, or send me the question. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you all. And we'll talk soon. Good day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks. Take
Thank you,
care.
everyone. Have a great one.
Thanks, bye.